There is a reason certain breathing rituals were hidden inside monasteries and ancient training manuals for centuries. It was not because they were mystical curiosities or harmless traditions. It was because they interfered with something extremely powerful inside the human brain. Modern neuroscience has finally given that system a name: the default mode network. This network is a group of interconnected brain regions that automatically activates whenever your mind is not focused on an external task. It produces your internal dialogue, replays memories, predicts future scenarios, and quietly builds the narrative you call your identity. Most people assume that voice in their head is simply their thinking. But in reality, much of it is automated. The default mode network operates like background software, running constantly, repeating learned patterns formed through stress, habit, and emotional conditioning. Over time, it becomes so dominant that it begins guiding your attention without your awareness. You have experienced this many times without realizing it. The moment you wake up, and your mind immediately starts replaying yesterday's problems. The way your thoughts wander while you try to concentrate on something important. The strange habit your brain has of rehearsing arguments or imagining conversations that have not even happened yet. None of these mental loops are chosen deliberately. They are generated automatically by this network because it evolved to predict danger and maintain a consistent story about who you are. In small amounts, this ability helps humans plan and reflect. But in the modern world, the system rarely turns off. Constant stimulation, endless information, and chronic stress keep the default mode network running continuously. Millions of people live inside this mental noise without realizing there is another way for the brain to operate. To understand why this matters, you must first recognize the trap created by the default mode network. This system is not simply a background feature of the brain. It is a powerful prediction engine that constantly reconstructs your sense of self. When the network becomes active, the brain shifts its attention inward and begins generating simulations. It replays memories, imagines future outcomes, analyzes past mistakes, and constructs narratives about what might happen next. In small doses, this process is useful. It allows humans to plan, learn from experience, and anticipate danger. But when the system runs continuously, it begins to dominate consciousness. In the modern world, that dominance has become common. Whenever your attention is not fully engaged in a task, the default mode network activates automatically. Your mind drifts away from the present moment and enters internal storytelling. You may begin remembering something embarrassing from years ago. You may imagine future conversations or replay unfinished arguments. Sometimes the thoughts appear as worries about problems that have not even happened yet. These mental loops feel personal, but they are generated by predictable neural activity. The brain is simply repeating patterns that it believes will help you prepare for uncertainty. Brain imaging studies show that people experiencing chronic stress or anxiety often have extremely strong default mode network activity. The system becomes locked into rumination, producing the same thoughts again and again. Instead of responding to the world as it actually is, the brain responds to imagined scenarios created by its own predictions. This is why the voice inside the mind can feel impossible to silence. Yet the network has a weakness. Its activity depends heavily on the rhythm of breathing and the chemical balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Alter the breathing rhythm deliberately, and the neural patterns that support this internal narrative begin to weaken. To understand how breath can interfere with the default mode network, you must first see how deeply breathing is connected to the brain. Most people think of breathing as a simple mechanical action that supplies oxygen to the body. In reality, it is one of the most powerful regulators of the nervous system. Every inhale and every exhale changes the chemical balance of gases in your bloodstream. Oxygen levels shift, carbon dioxide rises or falls, and these changes are constantly monitored by the brainstem. The brainstem acts as a control center that regulates breathing, heart rhythm, and many automatic processes that keep the body alive. When the chemical balance of the blood changes, the brainstem sends signals through the nervous system to adjust neural activity. One of the most important pathways involved in this process is the vagus nerve. This nerve connects the brainstem to the heart, lungs, and digestive organs, but it also influences emotional regulation and large brain networks involved in attention and self-reflection. When breathing becomes rapid and shallow, which often happens during stress or constant mental stimulation, the vagus nerve sends signals associated with alertness and threat detection. These signals support the activity of the default mode network, strengthening internal dialogue and mental rumination. But the relationship works in both directions. When breathing becomes slow, deep, and rhythmic, the signals traveling through the vagus nerve begin to change. Slower breathing increases parasympathetic activity, the branch of the nervous system associated with calm regulation and recovery. At the same time, carbon dioxide levels stabilize, and neural oscillations in the brain begin to shift. Brain imaging studies have shown that during controlled breathing, activity inside key default mode, network regions begins to decrease. As these regions quiet down, the brain reduces internal narration and shifts toward networks responsible for attention and sensory awareness. In simple terms, the breath begins interrupting the brain's automatic storytelling system. Now you are ready for the breathing protocol itself. And precision matters more than most people expect. Many breathing exercises focus only on relaxation, but this method is designed specifically to influence the nervous system in a way that weakens default mode network activity. Begin by sitting upright with your spine naturally aligned. Your body should feel stable but relaxed, allowing the diaphragm to move freely. If the posture is collapsed or the chest is tight, the breath becomes shallow, and the neurological signals you need will not appear. Close your mouth and breathe only through your nose. Nasal breathing slows airflow and increases nitric oxide production, which improves oxygen exchange and sends calming signals through the nervous system. Start by inhaling slowly through the nose for 4 seconds. Allow the breath to expand your lower abdomen first, rather than lifting the chest. This diaphragmatic movement encourages deeper air exchange and stabilizes breathing rhythm. When the lungs feel comfortably full, hold the breath gently for 4 seconds. During this brief pause, carbon dioxide levels rise slightly in the bloodstream. This change activates chemoreceptors connected to the brainstem, which influence autonomic nervous system activity and begin shifting neural rhythms. After the hold, exhale slowly through the nose for 6 seconds. The longer exhale is critical because it stimulates the vagus nerve and increases parasympathetic activity, signaling the body to enter a calmer state. As this signal travels through the nervous system, electrical activity supporting internal narrative loops begins to weaken. Maintain a smooth rhythm without forcing the breath. Continue repeating the cycle. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold 4 seconds. Exhale 6 seconds. Perform the sequence continuously for 10 minutes. After several minutes, many people notice that thoughts slow down and internal dialogue becomes quieter, indicating the brain's automatic narrative system is losing momentum. The first time you practice this breathing protocol, the effects may appear subtle, but measurable changes are already beginning inside the brain. During the first few minutes, the steady rhythm of the breath stabilizes carbon dioxide levels in the blood, while the extended exhale strengthens vagal signaling. This combination gradually reduces the neural activity that supports the default mode network. Most people notice the first change as a slight quieting of mental noise. Thoughts do not disappear instantly, but they become less forceful. Instead of pulling your attention into long chains of worry or memory, they pass more quickly through awareness. It can feel as if the internal voice has moved farther away, still present, but no longer dominating the mind. After several days of repeating the protocol, the nervous system begins adapting to the rhythm. The vagus nerve becomes more responsive, and the body enters a parasympathetic state faster. In practical terms, this means the brain learns to reduce automatic internal narration more efficiently. Situations that previously triggered immediate stress may begin to feel less overwhelming. You may notice a brief pause between an event and your reaction. That pause represents an important neurological shift because it shows that the brain is beginning to process information with greater regulatory control from the prefrontal cortex. By the end of the first week, the changes often become easier to recognize. Concentration improves because fewer cognitive resources are consumed by internal rumination. Mental fatigue decreases, and the mind feels clearer during tasks that once required effort. The default mode. Network has not disappeared, but its dominance weakens. Instead of constantly generating internal stories, it activates mainly when reflection or planning is actually useful. The brain slowly shifts toward networks responsible for attention and sensory awareness. Now comes the realization that changes how you understand your own mind. The moment the default mode network quiets, even briefly, you begin to notice something most people never experience. The constant voice that narrates your life, evaluates your choices, replays your mistakes, and predicts your future, suddenly loses its authority. For a few seconds, there is space where the commentary normally exists. Awareness remains, but the narration fades. This moment is important because it reveals a hidden truth about the brain. The voice in your head is not the same thing as your awareness. It is simply a process produced by neural circuits that evolved to simulate possibilities and maintain a sense of identity. When breathing repeatedly interrupts the default mode network, other brain systems begin to dominate activity. Networks responsible for attention and sensory processing become stronger, while internal storytelling becomes quieter. Instead of constantly replaying memories or predicting problems, the brain begins responding more directly to what is happening in the present moment. People often describe this shift as mental clarity. Colors appear more vivid, sounds feel sharper, and the body feels more grounded. These changes are not mystical experiences. They are simply the result of the brain operating without continuous internal narration. However, the default mode network is deeply ingrained through years of habit and stress. If the practice stops, the brain will gradually return to its familiar patterns of automatic thinking. That is why consistency is essential. 10 minutes of the breathing protocol each day is enough to keep interrupting the neural loops that dominate most minds. Over time, the brain learns that constant mental commentary is not necessary for stability or survival. So the challenge is simple. Practice the breathing rhythm regularly and observe how your mind responds. Because once you discover that the internal voice can become quiet, you begin to understand something powerful. You are not trapped inside the brain's automatic narrative.